This is another game from the epic blitz battles between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. Way back from when they were teenagers. That's when the online blitz rivalry started. You know, they played these matches against each other for hours and hours online. So this is part of their origin story. This blitz game was played on the ICC, the Internet Chess Club. And the ICC recently sent me a batch of games from those early days between Carlsen and Nakamura. So the Internet Chess Club was where everyone played in the 2000s. And it's recently had a relaunch and a redesign, so do check it out on chessclub.com. Time control in this game is 3 minutes for all moves, no increment, and was played in August 2004 when both players were already grandmasters. Nakamura was 16, Carlsen 13. I hope you enjoy it. In this game, Carlsen playing white, and e4 and knight f6 from Nakamura. Alekhine defense, I think one of these very annoying openings to face in blitz, because you're tempted forward with white, but it's very easy to overstep in this kind of position. Very tricky indeed. Carlsen keeps it simple. He just plays this so-called exchange variation, which just maintains a space advantage. But I think it's not the most testing line that white can play. But it's solid and decent. That's what you want in a blitz game, basically. And knight e2, so this basically allows black to grab this bishop, because obviously if the bishop retreats, then this pawn is on prise. White could play b3 in this position, so protecting this pawn. But in blitz, somehow, this is very, very straightforward. And yes, black is able to exchange off that strong bishop. However, as compensation, it clears the back rank for white. The queen is in a decent position. So, white gains time. And in a blitz game, gains time for development and the attack. G6 played by Nakamura, wants to play bishop f5, bring out the bishop, hit the queen, but, well, I think d5 is probably the most reliable move here. Instead of c5, the knight gets into c4. But g6, yeah, that creates some weaknesses around the king. Let's have a look. Bishop f5, queen d2. Now d5, but after c5, then the knight has to retreat. And, well, strategy in this game revolves around the idea that white has to try and keep this knight bottled in. You can see at the moment that that pawn controls these squares. That knight simply can't move. And Carlsen takes the initiative with bishop h6. Yep, g6, weaken those dark squares. Knight g3 hits the bishop, and you can see that Carlsen has a very nice initiative now. And yes, the time is ripe for the good old f-pawn to be launched down the board. And already this looks so dangerous for black. So Carlsen's opening has really come good here. So Nakamura plays bishop h4. So hoping to perhaps dissuade Carlsen from playing f5, but f5 comes anyway. And if bishop takes knight, then you can simply take on e6. Whoops. Let's do that again. Let me just show you that. Take on e6. f7 is threatening the bishop, so white wins. And if bishop takes f5, then white exchanges and takes here. And, well, this is going to be good for white. So bishop d7. Nakamura in trouble. But already in those days, Nakamura, such an experienced blitz player. And one thing that characterizes Nakamura's play is how resourceful he is in defense. And this is a skill that he really learned in playing these online blitz games, to always somehow keep on the board, keep the game alive. He's a brilliant defensive player. This is the kind of position where with white, when you're attacking, you need time to think things through, to get the attack absolutely right. You need to calculate, basically. And in blitz, you don't have time for that. In a classical game, I think Carlsen would win this one very quickly. Knight h5 is a killer. It really is a good move. So if that's taken, then obviously there's going to be disaster on the g file. And if bishop takes f5, then g4, and let's say here g5. I mean, this should be a winning position for white. But Carlsen took on g6 first, and then he played knight h5. And this isn't as good, because in this position, Nakamura took the knight, by the way. In this position, although it looks very, very good for white, the king has this square available. And king h7, although this wasn't played, this is a winning move. But this looks too scary. You know, you feel like there could be a killer move for white here. But in fact, black is a piece up and can survive. But again, in a blitz game, impossible to calculate that kind of variation. Instead, instinctively, Nakamura thought, right, I need my queen to come into the defense to block out white's queen. Hits the bishop. White's bishop retreats, and yeah, he starts to pack out the king side with his pieces, and even attacks this pawn. But in fact, Carlsen manages to regain the initiative. Actually, this is still fine for black. In some ways, Nakamura's instinct was right. If he'd played h4, forcing this endgame, then in fact, black is more than fine in this position. Anyway, Nakamura exchanged on e5, played the queen to g6. So yeah, he's continuing his strategy of matching white's queen with his own queen. Carlsen recaptured the piece, but with queen f2, he keeps the queens on, hitting this one, and queen g7. Now, here is where I'd like you to have a think. I'll have a drink. How would you play here with white? White to play. Very interesting moment in the game. And I think this next decision of Carlsen is very typical for him, actually. That's why I stopped at this moment in the game. So, white to play. What would you do next? Well, Carlsen played queen f6. Now, Carlsen loves to restrict his opponent's options. And, he certainly has nothing against endgames. So he's thinking that in this kind of position, well, great. I've kept that knight restricted and no moves, which means the rook can't get into the game, and that should give him the advantage in the endgame. Well, as we're going to see, in fact, his judgment wasn't correct. He should play for the attack here, actually restricting this knight in another way. Well done if you found queen h4. An excellent move, preventing knight e7, threatening rook f3 to g3, and actually white has just enough time to get a mating attack. So, I mean, actually the variations are very instructive, but I'll just zip through this very, very quickly. It still requires incredible finesse for white to win this position. But there's a very nice moment in a second. Queen e5 check is an excellent move. Black's queen cannot interpose because of rook g8 check, winning the queen. And after this, there's another nice little finesse. And this, again, the black queen can't interpose, and queen e3. And again, you can see this knight is prevented from coming to e7, and this is a winning position. If b6, trying to bring that knight into play, white has enough time to swing this knight round. And once that extra piece joins the attack with knight e6, then white is winning. Okay, that's quite subtle, but let's compare that with queen f6. So at first glance, looks tremendous. Typical Carlsen, loves to restrict his opponent. But after b6, in fact, black is breaking out. If b4, then black's king comes up to g6. And sooner or later, a5 is going to come to break down these pawns. Or, yeah, simply king f6 and the knight can get back into the game. Depends how white plays, but basically black is doing well there. Or c takes b6, again, this is fine. Or knight e2, yeah, just take here. So Carlsen tried rook e1. Bring the rook down the board. And then knight a4, but here's the thing. Black can break out with knight b6. And yeah, black is more than fine here. Basically, black's king is coming up to take this pawn. Got a nice clump of pawns in the middle. So Carlsen exchanged and took on c5, but, well, at the moment, black is a pawn up, and there's another one about to fall, the pawn on f6. And this is a very simple win, actually. And Nakamura's technique was excellent. So no weak pawn on h5, he's just exchanged that off. And now Nakamura is 2 pawns up. And at this point, Carlsen decided enough was enough. Nakamura in complete control with 2 extra pawns, so Carlsen resigned. Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting encounter, particularly this moment where Carlsen's instinct was to head for the endgame and restrict, whereas maintaining the attack would have been the right way forward. And yeah, Nakamura's defensive skills, although not a perfect game, absolutely superb to actually come through this position. I mean, if we go back to, let's say, this position, for Nakamura to hold this, well, more than indeed win the game with black, I think is remarkable and says much about his tenacity, which, yeah, he has to this day. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.